One of the things that I think is very, very tough in the workplace is when you have an employee who is living with cancer. And although we work with this every single day with people out in the community, when it hits your own workplace, it's very tough.
My wife, Lynn, was a social worker at Alive Hospice. She was actually the director of clinical services. She worked here for about 7 or 8 years.
She had been complaining of some symptoms and had an appointment to go see the doctor. And after that doctor visit, she had surgery and she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
There was no illusion about how serious this was. In lots of places, you can pretend it's not serious or that everything's going to be okay. But this was not the case here because we knew what survival rates were. Her coworkers did, she did. And so that kind of set a tone for us to be prepared for her death, which was inevitable, we felt like. We were not without hope, but we were prepared to deal with her death.
Our program director a number of years ago was a woman named Terry. She brought incredible energy and creativity and leadership to that program, was very dedicated to her staff and to the clients, did great work in the community. She wasn't one to go see the doctor very often, and so she had some symptoms and went to see a physician, and they expressed some concern that she might have ovarian cancer, and they put her in the hospital immediately. They did surgery and removed a great fruit-sized tumor and diagnosed her with stage 3 ovarian cancer. When Terry started losing time at work, I called her in and told her about family medical leave and that we were going to initiate that. And while we were talking about that, I let her know about the other benefits that were available to her. I said, you know, I don't believe you're going to need these, but I want you to know what's out there if you need it. And I talked about the vacation policy and the shared vacation policy, that she could request leave and folks would be donating their vacation hours to a pool and she could request that leave as she needed it. That if it got to a point where she needed to go on short-term disability, we would initiate that, and I told her what that would mean in terms of the percentage of salary that she would get. Because she was worried about, you know, if I'm not working, I have no income, I can't live, what will I do? So it was a little premature, but I wanted her not to worry about that down the road. And she seemed grateful to know that that was out there for her if she needed it.
When she found out she was terminally ill, she, from that day forth, never came back to the workplace and never drove a car and never cooked a meal. Not because she was impaired, it's because her priorities shifted totally. And she did the things that were more important to her.
One of the things that I did that was helpful to me was that I went to a lot of her chemotherapy treatments with her. And we would laugh and cut up, and it just made it, I think, better for her, and it helped me to stay in touch with what she was going through.
At places I have worked, when there has been an illness or even a death, I feel like the number one ingredient of dealing with it effectively is to give people accurate information. And they certainly did that. People knew what was happening to Lynn. They kept everyone informed, but they weren't intrusive. They would go through me and ask, how is she doing, what's happening to her, and I would tell them that. So it was only one phone call instead of a whole bunch of phone calls. And then the staff was very well informed.
If their long-term prognosis is not good, then certainly there are a lot of emotional and business issues that have to be dealt with. And you have to be deliberate about dealing with those sort of behind the scenes.
The executive team talked about how to deal with replacing this position, Terry's position, on an interim basis, and then certainly more formally on a permanent basis. We sort of weighed our options. We felt like we had an internal candidate who could step up to the plate, who wasn't as qualified as Terry, but certainly had the support of that entire staff and some really good skills and could do the job. And so we made that determination. And we also talked to Terry about that and told her what we were thinking and what did she think, and she absolutely thought that was the best thing to do.
She asked me to clean her office out about a month after she had left work here. And that's an interesting way that the staff supported me. They knew I was coming, and it was awful to do. I mean, it was almost like she had already died. And so I had to go through her drawers and everything, pictures and stuff. And so 2 or 3 of the staff, it's almost like they took turns coming in there and checking on me to make sure I was okay, it was a very loving thing.
As she started losing her memory and started feeling pretty bad, she still wanted to be involved. And sometimes in the meetings, even when she was in meetings, it was a little hard to keep up, and her contributions maybe were just a little off. And that was hard for staff and probably hard for her.
When that person's position is to be replaced, it needs to be done with care. Once again, the issue of how long has that person been there? What are the bonds? What are the relationships? It's good to kind of look over the landscape of that before it is done in haste. If that person's position was quite critical and there is a need for that position to be filled quickly, I think that is the message that needs to be given.
I felt very supported by my peers and by the executive director at that time and my direct supervisor. They were all involved with Lynn. Everybody, would do whatever they could.
It is the message, I think, that is very important, that the employer give to the staff that I'm paying attention to this. This affects me as it affects you. It is my job to offer you as much as I can.
Eventually, Lynn became a hospice patient, and she was kind enough to tell them that I could not be her hospice nurse, that we needed to just be friends.
We took turns, we had assignments, and people would drop meals and just leave them on the porch and ring the doorbell and leave, because she really didn't want to see anybody. And then she went into the hospital for the last time, and some of us were at her bedside. And then she passed.
It's important that the employee be given a chance to go to the funeral if that's what they need in order to better deal with their grief over losing a fellow coworker. And when Lynn died, the day of the funeral, I can't remember how it worked out, but we were all able to go to the funeral, and I don't remember taking a day off of work, so I know that somebody was covering that.
One brother was a beneficiary, and so I explained that to him and helped him go through the process of obtaining those funds, explaining to him about getting the death certificate. I mean, he just didn't know quite what to do, and I'd never been through the process either, so I had to find out for myself what are the steps and then guide him through that.
The reality that grief does not finish, the reality that there is no finish line, exists in the workplace as well with families who experience loss. People often talk in terms of getting over it. When will I be over it? As if it is something like a cold or the flu. This is simply a process of learning how to integrate a loss into one's life fabric, and that happens in the workplace as well as in one's own private life.